First thing we're going to do today, we want to get kit in, remove the saddlebags, the seat, and disconnect the battery. Okay.
Right here is located the maxi fuse, supplies the power to the entire bike. We're going to remove these chrome covers here from the frame on both sides and these saddlebag brackets so we can see the rest of the fender bolts. We'll remove this bracket and we won't reuse it in the 180 kit. The fender or the license plate will be mounted in the fender.
You need to remove both bolts here, hold the bottom part of the license plate bracket, or the horseshoe bracket.
One of these bolts goes clear through the fender, and the other bolt just goes under the chrome strut, down straight there. Just pull this out a little ways and then you can slide this clean out like that. I like to lay all my old hardware that I take out in order. That way you just keep track of everything for disassembly and assembly. We'll remove these muffler bodies so we can remove the wheel with these two bolts here and the clamp right here, and the muffler will slide out.
Sometimes you have a real hard time getting the muffler off, so usually here, this won't come off very good, so you push down and pull on it to get it loosened up a little bit. The clamp is really tight. I have a 3/8 ratchet wrench. We're going to remove the back two bolts in the bolt guard or the belt guard and just loosen the front bolt. And slide the guard out. Then we slide the belt guard out. Put these bolts back next to the guard so you don't lose them.
Place the rear of this motorcycle on a jack, or if you can get it up on a block. If you got a nice flat jack like these, it works pretty good. I like to set them right here on this crossover piece on the bottom of the frame. I like to go up so I know the wheel's moving, and they go back down just a little bit to take the weight off, so I just can't move it.
First to remove the axle through the rear wheel. We're going to pull this E-clip off here and then loosen this nut so we can pull the axle out the other side of the bike.
The reason I left a little bit of weight on that wheel is so all the wheel, that weight of the tire isn't sitting on the axle, so the axle will slide out a lot easier. Now I can push that axle out just about with my fingers. You'll see when this axle slides out, it'll run into this saddlebag support. So by removing these two bolts, you can either pick it up enough to pull it out, but actually this whole assembly here will have to be removed anyways. So at this time we'll remove the crash guard, a saddlebag mount to pull the axle out.
You'll need to have a 9/16 wrench on the inside to hold this nut. And this one just threads into the frame.
Once you remove these two bolts, you can just slide this right up and out. I like to set it on a nice rag so you don't scratch nothing. By removing the saddlebag bracket, we can slide this axle out real nicely. Sometimes if you got a bike with a lot more miles, you might need to tap it out with a rubber hammer, but they usually slide out pretty good. You can pull them up here and get them out of the way for a little while. Wheel, then we can remove that wheel. Once you get it up a little bit, pull your belt out of the way. Hold it out for you as you go up. And by rolling that wheel back and turning it sideways, it'll slip right out of there. 2008 Harley-Davidson touring models did a cush drive pulley system where it sits on rubber biscuits. And with our new 180 wheel, we'll be reusing the cush drive system. So we'll remove these 5 bolts here and pull the cush drive off.
As removing the last bolt, we want to make sure that the rotor will not hit the rim and drop to the floor.
On pre-07s, there's a bolt in this fender underneath here. You'll want to remove that bolt to get the fender out. The only 2 bolts we have left right here are the 2 bolts right here, which are T40s. There's one on each side. Then unplug the wiring harness and remove it, and your rear fender will slip right out.
Fender comes right out.
Get a good can of Showtime or a cleaner that you prefer, and just clean all this stuff. On the earlier models, pre-07, you'll have to change the inner pulley to get a smaller belt on it. Because the older ones run a wide belt and you want to go to a 1-inch. 07, 08 up, like Dan was saying earlier, you can use this belt and the stock pulley. We also offer a different pulley for the front and rear for these models also. Because right now they run a 34 front and a 66 rear tooth pulleys. When we find it out going to a 30 and a 70 on the rear, it gets a little bit better pull through the highway gears and stuff. It's not necessary, nothing you have to do, but it's definitely an option for some people.
We're going to lay all of our parts out and keep all of them separate, not to mix anything up. That's why we did not pull them out of the box before by instructions. So we have our gasket kit, our rear E-coated fender, here's our.
This is the optional pulley, comes with it, the 70 tooth. This is an optional, it does not come with the 08 kits. We will not be using it in this kit either. And this is the front pulley, the 30 tooth, the optional 30 tooth. In the box you'll find your instructions, do not lose these, go step by step. This kit comes with absolutely everything you need besides your wheel.
We're gonna test fit this in the bike to make sure everything fits before we get it painted. To make sure there's not anything that jumps out at us after we already have a painted fender. Maybe the fender was damaged to you in shipping, or your bike is damaged. We want to make sure that this fits before we do any kind of painting to this fender. So we can just set it up in here.
Set this fender up here, slip some bolts in it, put our fillers in. Everything fits nice right here. I can tell that nothing's too tight. Everything lines up nice. I pulled the bolt out, the stock bolt. The 2 washers that came off of it, one's a lock washer, one's a flat washer. We'll reuse them. The new bolts that came in the shock hardware bag is an 1/8 inch longer. Take your new chrome bolt, slide over the original hardware, go back in the original hole with the spacer in between the shock and the shock boss. Make sure you have Loctite on the bolt like I did, and make sure you use your torque wrench to the right value that it says in your service manual.
I'll remove the existing bolt. Here they are again, taking both pieces of the washer and the flat washer off the old bolt. Putting them on the new bolt. Lock washer first. And we'll put a little dab of red Loctite on there again. We need our 1/8 inch spacer next to the frame. Next step on our directions, we're going to replace the bag support bar with a new stock Harley Street Glide style bar. Putting the flat washer on the button head and then put the spacer on. And then we'll put the lock nut behind, like so. The drop brackets on. Chris already installed this on. So we have, in our hardware kit, we have 2 bolts and then 2 locking nuts. And there's also 2 short bolts with each have a flat washer. We'll use we'll use those here in a few minutes. And we'll just tighten these bolts down, 1/2 inch. Put the support strut on to the drop bracket we just assembled. Get it kind of snug.
You don't want to get them too tight because we'll be running bolts through the second hole here on one each side. It'll go through these and the fender. So if you get this too tight before, you'll have a hard time getting the bolt through.
Now we're going to put the fender support bracket on to these drop brackets and our bag support bar all together here. That's right. So you didn't really do it.
So just keep everything loose so you got movement when you put the fender in. That way you ain't jamming anything tight, scratching any paint. You got plenty of movement everywhere. Once you get the fender in there, then you can go back and retighten everything. A little dab will do you. Today when we're installing this 180 kit on Jason Hansen's bike, I just wanted to go over a couple things and show you a couple different deals with our fender versus the stock fender. As you can tell, our stock fender is pretty close to being like, our fender's being like the stock one. It's got a stretch to it. It's made of 16 gauge steel, so it's real heavy, solid fender. And you got the options where we can put these different tail lights in, bolts in. So there's basically no mods you need to do to it. You can see right here, side holes. Cut out for the bag supports. It's cut out for the seat tab. That's cut out for your wires to run through. Oval tail light in. And you can see all the extra wire that we have here. What actually is going to happen is after I run the wire through heat shrink and shrink it down to the length I want, I will actually end up cutting this end off and then soldering it onto this, so then I still got the stock plug-in onto it. After paint, you'll want to stick these lights in here to make sure that there isn't too much mud or paint material in here and your light won't fit. This one here goes in there pretty tight. Fits in there nicely. If there was too much paint, it wouldn't go in there at all. You shrink over your wires and you don't get a nice shrink on it. You usually leave yourself about 4 inches of bare wire.
A couple things we want to remove from our old fender that we're going to stick in the new Klockworks 180 fender. We want to remove these two bolt nuts, and that holds the wiring harness here inside the fender. And we also want to remove the nut for the seat. This is the Klockworks license plate frame. We're going to French it in for the fender, the holes that we already drilled. I'm going to remove the license plate off of here, and then we have to do just a little bit of trimming to make it fit in the pocket for the 180 fender.
This here template that came along with the fender to drill the holes for the license plate is the same template you can use to trim the license plate to fit into this. Once you get it laid out where you want her to be, you just pull that off, throw it on the floor. Garbage. Stick your loom on there, nice and tight.
Alright, as you see, Jason and Chris were in the process of expertly mounting this oval LED tail light. I just wanted to point out one thing to you. If you'll see, it is mounted in what we call our Klockworks oval tail light mount ring. Kind of self-explanatory as to what it is. But how we do it, it's a ring that is either available through Klockworks to fit in your fender by yourself at home or by your fabrication guy, or we also offer the service. What happens is an oval hole is cut in the fender, then a 1/4 inch thick ring is welded into the fender that allows a nice flat place for the taillight to mount to. It also offers a little structural rigidity to the fender, plus it spaces that out a little bit to make sure you have ample tire clearance on the back side. And usually after we weld it in, or some of our customers weld it in, it just takes just a very small amount of body filler on there at your paint shop, coat of primer, and it molds in pretty nicely.
Okay, right now we're going to cut these bolts off because they have quite a few threads showing. You don't want your tire to hit that, so we're going to cut all 8 bolts off, just right at the nut. So make sure you wear your safety glass.
We're going to install install the fender now on this 180 bow tire kit. We got our hardware laid out, and the back bolts, and the front bolts, and the washers, so everything's separated. We know how it goes. Make sure you follow your instructions so you get your spacers in the right spot and the right orientation that they belong. We always use a little Showtime or glass cleaner, spray along these rubber seals here to help slide the fender in, not to damage any paint. We left all this hardware here loose earlier in the video. That way when you're putting the fender in, you can spread it and play with it a little bit while you're getting the fender in. And once you get your bolts in and everything's in place, go ahead and go around and make sure you get all your bolts tightened up. Slide it through the hole. It has the same stamp as the factory one. Slide it through, then put your clip on.
Okay, now we're going to move on to the filler panel portion of the motorcycle. We always recommend to mount the lower fillers first, especially if they have a light or a marker light like Jason's do here. That way you can mount these, and I mount them loosely, and then once I mount the filler itself, you can run the wire up the frame and get it zip tied to the frame rail before the upper filler gets mounted. I'll always, the fillers come with the supplied hardware, and I'll always use just a dab of red Loctite. They mount to the chrome saddlebag support rails that run alongside the fender. I'm going to slip the wire to the back side of the bracket that kind of holds it in away from the bag on the bottom side. You see, as I run it up top, I'm going to run it along the top frame rail, and I'll leave some slack here, and as you see, I'll grab a few small zip ties and I'll zip tie it here and right here, and that will hold it out of the way, out of sight.
With the right length bolt, docking point, spacer, through the filler, another spacer on the back side of the filler. I put Loctite on the bolt. Slide it in place, being careful not to chip any paint. I'm going to install this rear hanger that goes all the way back. The spacer goes in between that bracket and the filler. After your lower fillers on, your top fillers, make sure that the spacing looks the same from side to side. And if both are the same from side to side, pretty good chance you have all your spacing correct. Leaving these loose, we'll set the bag on, set these in the right position, and tighten them up. Now that we have our fillers in place and fender in place, I've ran the wires up to the battery box area. I've got the wire ends stripped here, and I'm going to tin each one of these ends, and I'll show you how to wire them in. After you're reading the instructions and you find what color matches to wear, go ahead and solder them on. Make sure you have heat shrink placed over it already. After you got all your wiring done, after you're done with all that, you can go ahead and hook the battery cables back on. Plug your maxi fuse back in. Hook up all your things where they're labeled. This one is labeled plate. You'll plug it in. Plug in your right license plate or right marker light into where it says right. Plug your left into where it says left. Tail light into the main one. You have everything neatly put away nicely and make sure no pinch points. Zip tied, you can go ahead and put your seat back on.
Alright, got the new wheel laced up, the new tire mounted, ready to install.
On Jason's 180 kit, we're going to use the stock cush drive on this 2008 model. All the spacing will be correct. Just follow your torque specs in your service manual.
Okay, we've got Jason's wheel placed up under the bike. As you'll notice, we've kind of got it jacked up at a pretty severe angle. But a lot of times when you install the extended fenders on the bike, you got to jack them up a little bit more to get the tire up in there. Now that we've got the tire positioned in there with the cush drive pulley set on it, we slip the belt over the pulley. And now I will just carefully start lowering the bike down, making sure that I don't bind up the bike or swing arm onto the wheel or tire itself as I lower it. First thing I'm going to do here is slide in the factory rear brake caliper bracket. Once I get that slid into place, next thing I will put in is the stock right side or brake side wheel spacer. Okay, once again I'll install the right hand side axle adjuster, the eccentric cam plate. Install the nut finger tight. Once again, we set the belt tension using the specs given to you in your Harley-Davidson service manual. Now we will torque down our axle nut to factory specs and install our C-clip or our safety clip on the end. And then all that's left for the wheel section is to reinstall the rear caliper.
After you get your wheel in place, you'll want to install the brake caliper pads. Sometimes you have to remove your pads to get the brake caliper in there better. Sometimes you don't have to. After you get that done, spin the wheel a couple times, make sure everything spins free and there ain't no binding. And after this process, we can put our muffler on, put our bags on, and go test ride. Once you have your bags positioned where you want, go ahead and tighten up the 3/4 inch bolts and hold the bag supports.
That's what the smell was in here?
We finished Jason's bike up yesterday. He was gone out of the shop. He had some pressing business outside in his secret life as a superhero. So he was at home for the day. He wanted us to wait to finish the bike, but Chris and I were so excited to see it finish that we just decided to finish it, and we're going to roll it off the lift right now. And Jason should be here in a little bit, and we'll get his reaction to his finished motorcycle. Hey Jason, how you doing?
You guys finished it! Oh my god! You guys got it! Oh! Oh, thanks guys!